Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Vrindavan Dham ki
Jai.
Navadvip Mayapur Dham ki
Jai.
Jagannath Puri Dham ki
Jai.
Gangamaya Yamuna Maya ki
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi ki
Jai.
Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki
Jai.
Transcendental Book Distribution ki
Jai.
Grantaraj Shrimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki
Jai.
Jai Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bo.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories, all glories, all glories to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga.
Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, good morning. We are continuing our study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto, chapter 10, entitled The Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. And we are on text 30. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Rayanam Namaskritam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Virajit Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So, verse up here. Thank you. Ita param shri tvam apashta peshalam nirasta socham bata sadhu kurvate yasam grihat pushkara lochana patir najat vapait aritibiridish prishan ita param stritvam apashta pelasham nirasta socham bata sadhu kurvate yasam grihat pushkara lochanam patir najat vapaitya ritibiridish prishan vita param stritvam apastapaleshalam nirvasta socham bata sadhu kurvate yasam vihat pushkara lochana patir najat vapaitya ripiridi Sparshan. Please.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Etaha param stritvam apastapeshalam nirasta socham batasadu kurvate yasham grahat puskaralochana patir najatvapaiti ahratibir hridhi sparsham prashan.
Eta parang strittvamapastapeshalang nirasta shauchang batasadu kurvate yasam grihat pushkaralochana patir najatu paitya hritibhirhidi sprishan.
Hare Krishna. Etaha param sri tvam apastapeshalam nirasta socham batasadu kurvate yasam gruhat pushkaralochana patir na jatvapetya hridhi sprishan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Prabhu.
Please go.
Eta param sritvam apestapeshalam nirasta chacham pata sadhu karvate yasham grihat pushkara lochana patir na jatva pati aritibir ridha spirishan. Thank you.
Eta param sritvam apastapeshalam nirasta saucham bhatasadu kurvate yasam grahat
Krishna Maharaj.
pushkaralochana patir najat apeti arhatibir hridisprashan.
Eta param stritvam apastapeshalam nirasta saucham batasadu kurvate yasham grihat pushkaralochana patir najat vapaiti ahritibhir hridhi sprishan.
Anyone else? Okay, then we'll move on to the synonyms. Etaha, all these women. Param, highest. Stritvam, womanhood. Apastapeshalam, without individuality. Nirasta, without. Shocham, purity. Batasadu, auspiciously glorified. Kurvate, do they make. Yasam, from whose. Grihat, homes. Pushkara lochana, the lotus-eyed. Pati, husband. Najatu, never at any time. Apaiti, goes away. Arit ibi, by presentation. Ridi, in the heart. Sparshan, endeared. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives, despite their being without individuality and without purity. Their husband, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. He always pleased their hearts by making valuable presentations. Purport. The devotees of the Lord are purified souls. As soon as the devotees surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord sincerely, the Lord accepts them, and thus the devotees at once become free from all material contaminations. Such devotees are above the three modes of material nature. There is no bodily disqualification of a devotee, just as there is no qualitative difference between the Ganges water and the filthy drain water when they are amalgamated. Women, merchants, and laborers are not very intelligent, and thus it is very difficult for them to understand the science of God or to be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. They are more materialistic, and less than them are the Kiratas, the Hunas, the Andaras, the Palindas, the Pulakshas, the Abiras, the Kankas, Yavanas, the Kashas, etc. But all of them can be delivered if they are properly engaged in devotional service of the Lord. By engagement in the service of the Lord, the designative qualifications are removed. And as pure souls, they become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. The fallen girls under the clutches of Bhaumasura sincerely prayed to Lord Krishna for their deliverance, and their sincerity of purpose made them at once pure by virtue of devotion. The Lord therefore accepted them as his wives, and thus their lives became glorified. Such auspicious glorification was still more glorified when the Lord played with them as the most devoted husband. The Lord used to live with his 16,108 wives constantly. He expanded himself into 16,108 plenary portions, and each and every one of them was the Lord himself, without deviation from the original personality. The Shruti mantra affirms that the Lord can expand himself into many. As husband of so many wives, he pleased them all with presentations, even at a costly endeavor. He brought the Parijata plant from the heaven and implanted it at the palace of Satyabhama, one of his principal queens. If, therefore, anyone desires the Lord to become one's husband, the Lord fulfills such desires in full. O Manganata Barandasha Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umliyatam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vansha Kopa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Verse again. All these women auspiciously glorified their lives despite their being without individuality and without purity. Their husband, the lotus-eyed personality of Godhead, never left them alone at home. He always pleased their hearts by making valuable presentations. This is when they say all these women it is the ladies on the rooftops in Hastinapur that are looking upon the Lord as he is departing Hastinapur, going back to Dwarka. And it is mentioned earlier in this chapter that this talk of these ladies that are observing this on the roof, that are talking and glorifying about Krishna, is actually it's higher and more pleasing than the Vedic hymns. And this is because it is directly glorifying the activities and the attributes, the characteristics and qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. Whereas the Vedic hymns, we can become, or ultimately they're intended to bring one to the lotus feet of the Lord. One can also become distracted and fall into the performance of fruitive activities for elevation to the heavenly planets. And therefore the Bhagavad Gita in the 53rd verse of the 2nd chapter, it says, when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you have attained divine consciousness. So Krishna being the goal of all the purpose of the Vedas, he is the goal and the purpose of the Vedas. Vedaischa sever aham eva vedyo vedanta krit veda eva chaham. The glorification of these ladies in Hastinapur who are looking upon Krishna, glorifying his activities, is considered to be the highest. This purport is very direct, and it's talking about when a devotee comes in contact with the Lord, he becomes purified of all his material contaminations. The soul is originally pure, but due to his desire to want to enjoy separately from Krishna, Krishna creates an environment in this material world. Just like a prison house is given comparison to a prison house. But in order to execute the soul's desires, Krishna creates various situations. A false ego, because the real ego is that the soul is an eternal servant of God. But in order to believe that he's not an eternal servant of God, it adopts a false sense of self, a false ego. And under that false sense of self, it begins to act in various ways under the spell of illusion in order to fulfill its desires for pleasure separate from Krishna. And thus it becomes impure. As the water drops from the sky and hits the ground and becomes contaminated with the dirt, mud, which is originally transparent, now becomes filthy. So in the same way, our material desires have contaminated us. And then our action on those material desires, it generates various forms of reactions called karma. And we're born again and again into various bodies. It was called the cycle of samsara. Again and again, again and again. Sometimes we get, different types of bodies that are conducive to fulfilling our material desires. But when one has the good fortune of meeting a devotee of the Lord, and comes in contact and performs devotional service, one undergoes the purification process, and one becomes free from all material contaminations. This is the glory, one of the glories of the process of bhakti. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, there are 3 analogies that are given with regards to the power of transcendental knowledge or devotion to the Lord, and how they actually work in purifying the living entity. Let's see if anybody recalls from the audience what they may be. In the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. See, so one of them is, it gives the example of fire. It says, as a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions of material activities. And the knowledge that he's speaking about is transcendental knowledge of Lord Krishna and the living entity's relationship with Lord Krishna. Right before that, it says, even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you're situated on the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross the ocean of miseries. That's this material world. And then finally, he says, the doubts that have arisen in your heart out of ignorance. And that ignorance is that we are our bodies, and that we are separate from Lord Krishna. And should be slashed with the weapon of transcendental knowledge. So these three examples are given in the Bhagavad Gita of how the purificatory process takes place. It burns to ashes. It's like a boat that allows one to travel over the ocean of samsara. And it's like a weapon, like a sword that slashes through and eliminates any type of misunderstanding. So here within this, there's a lot of supportive text, and this is one of many places where Srila Prabhupada speaks about this, and Lord Krishna speaking about this, and Krishna's devotees speaking about this, how there is no bodily disqualification of a devotee, just as there is no qualitative difference between the Ganges water and the filthy drain water when they are amalgamated. Amalgamated means to unite or combined. This is an extremely important point that we should really become convinced of philosophically, and also practice in our dealings with devotees. There is no qualitative difference, no bodily disqualification of a devotee. Of course, we hear that, and we understand from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya that there, according to one's development of their Krishna consciousness, there are different stages where one may become, one is just beginning the process of purification, the Kanishta Adhikari, the Madhyama Adhikari, and then ultimately the Uttama Adhikari. There are different stages of development of that Krishna consciousness. But it should also be seen that if one is in the shower, if one is dirty, and then one gets in the shower, eventually through execution of the process of Krishna consciousness, one will become cleansed, one will become clean. As given reference in this verse, Bhagavad Gita 9:32, where Krishna says, "O son of Pritha, those who take shelter of me though they be of lower birth, women, merchants, sudras, they can attain the supreme destination. And we find Srila Prabhupada similarly in this purport stating that when one takes to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, there is no distinction between lower and higher classes of people. In the material conception of life, there are divisions. But for a person engaged in the transcendental devotional service of the Lord, there are not. Everyone is eligible for the supreme destination. Therefore, devotional service and the guidance of a pure devotee are so strong that there is no discrimination between the lower and higher classes of men. Anyone can take to it. It made me think how in most references, when we talk about distinctions, usually we refer to the Indian caste system, or even the original intention of that is the Varnashram system, where there's various different class distinctions. But it is actually prevalent throughout the world, and has been in the course of modern history. There's class distinctions of wealth, of education, and even discrimination of women. Not just what we see throughout India. The women's equality to vote, only came, in the, it was like I think it was in the 1920s, if I recall correctly. Oftentimes, it is, it's mentioned that women, their ability to make money, it's actually a fact. I mean, if you study the statistics, you see that women typically make less than men, have less opportunities for growth than men as far as economically. You see that there's divisions among the poor and the rich. Oftentimes you see what in the film industry, they like to bring this out because they like to show that whenever there's usually a romance movie, it's due to the fact that either it's a woman that comes from a very affluent family and she falls in love with somebody who's in a lower family, or vice versa, a man that's in an affluent family and he falls in love with a woman who's very simple and maybe uneducated. And that becomes a big problem within the family. The families don't want to mingle like that. So in the material world, these divisions are there. And that's because we've taken on material bodies, and those material bodies have, we get all these aspects that go along with it. We get families, we get classifications, we get opportunities or don't have opportunities. And this is all based on our karma. These are all material considerations. These are not, and it's not in the absolute reality. And it doesn't deal with the absolute realm, which is the spiritual reality. And that is that we are all servants of Krishna. Another reference to this is in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the second canto, 4th chapter, text 18. And also mentioned here is a list of other groups, the Kirata, the Hunya, the Andhra, the Palinda, the Palukshas, the Ambira, the Shumba, the Yavana, members of the Kasha race, how they are also considered to be less likely to engage in the higher activities of self-realization due to the environment of sinful nature that they've inherited due to their karma. And it was very timely because just yesterday Vishnugada Prabhu was mentioning this as well. And here it appeared in this verse. So if you'd like to read about each of these groups, it's available in this purport of Canto 2, Chapter 4, Text 18. Due to the research, he did some research. We found out about the Andhras and why they were part of this category. But the point is that the Supreme Lord, being all-powerful, can under any circumstance accept anyone from any part of the world in any condition. And he does this either personally, as we see in some of these pastimes that are mentioned here, as adopting the wives of Bhaumasura, or he does through his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. We see Lord Chaitanya, he accepted many devotees from communities outside of the typical Varnashram system. And he himself, declared to us that he does not belong to any caste or social order, but he is an eternal servant of the Lord. I am not a Brahmana, I am not a Kshatriya, I am not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra, nor am I a brahmachari, a householder, a vanaprastha or a sannyasi. I identify myself as the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. So this is the pathway to self-realization, and we have to be very careful not to get caught up in seeing devotional life through the material lens. It said, just as the deity should never be seen as made of just wood or stone. No one should think that a person coming from a lower caste or family who's taken to the path of Krishna consciousness is still the same lower class. You see with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he made the Namacharya Haridas Thakur, who was born into a Muslim family, Muslim by birth. And he was the example, the Acharya, the teacher for all time of how to develop love of God by chanting the holy names. You see that Srila Rupa and Sanatan, in their previous activities in that life, they worked for the Muslim government, basically giving up all their social status within the Hindu society. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, accepted them and made them his primary, several of his primary associates, in charge of writing most of the bhakti literatures that we read from, translating and writing and commentaries on. When Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they delivered Jagai and Madai, and they embraced them, he basically removed all the sins from Jagai and Madai and said, basically, go forth and sin no more. And he told them they should not be considered to be sinners. Why? Because they have accepted the lotus feet of Krishna, and they're chanting the holy names of the Lord. So the lesson here is that in our material lives, due to our upbringings, due to our cultural, cultural biases that we may develop, we should not. We have to be able to move past that. Specifically, with devotees, we should never consider, according to birth, race, economic status, educational background, none of these are a consideration for one to practice and become elevated in devotional service. Kiva vipra, kiva nasi sujo kenanai, ye Krishna tattva veda se guru hai. That whether one is a brahmana, a sannyasi, or even a sudra, one can actually become a spiritual master if he understands the tattva, the truth about Krishna. So if we have this tendency, we should defeat it with the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And if we're struggling with this, we have some preconceived notion of, a Vaishnava has to be like this, scholarly, or, if you have a certain birth, economic or whatever, or we see somebody as disqualified because of that, we should really pray to Krishna to release us from this mentality. We should do this for our own purification and true understanding and realization, but also for Krishna's pleasure and for the pleasure of the community of the devotees. Wanted to just take a look here at one of the pastimes that was being mentioned with Krishna liberating the ladies, the girls who were taken by the demon Bhaumasura, and it was 16,100 of them, were taken, and they were in distress, and they prayed. Lord Krishna came and delivered them, and he was actually going. Lord, the demigods came. Lord Indra and his associates came to the Lord and asked them to please take care of this Bhaumasura who was creating so much disturbance. So he went and he killed. He went to the planet there where Bhaumasura was, and he killed him. And then when the 16,100 wives, they prayed to Krishna, please accept me. Krishna accepted them. And it stated that they should not be considered as fallen, or, they were touched by another, by somebody else, or they were, and we see that sometimes, people, they go through various relationships, or they're divorced, or, etc. Here, Krishna is saying everything belongs to Krishna. Krishna has accepted them, and the fact that Krishna is now playing with them, and he becomes their devoted husband, and makes different valuable presentations to them. This makes it even more glorified. So it's not like he simply just accepted them as like a charity case. Okay, I'll take care of you. You can come and I'll maintain you. But he's actually showing them attention and affection. On his way to kill Bhaumasura, he was actually taking Satyabhama, one of his principal co-wives. Ramcharan Prabhu is explaining on Tuesday, he gave a breakdown of the principal 8 wives that Krishna had in Dwarka before he accepted the 16,100 wives. Satyabhama being one of those principal queens. And earlier on, Narada Muni had given a Parijata flower to Rukmini, who was also one of the chief wives of principal queens in Dwarka. And Satyabhama, who had a tendency to become a little bit feisty, she started becoming a little bit jealous, and it's actually stated in the Krishna book, she developed an inferiority complex. Why did Narada Muni give that to her and not to me? So to satisfy Satyabhama's anxiety, Krishna said, well, how would you like it if I why just settle for one flower? I'll get you a full Parijata tree and we'll plant it here and you'll have unlimited Parijata flowers. So that made her very, very pleased and happy. So upon going to get the Parijata tree, he went up to Lord Indra's abode, into his planet, the heavenly planet. And this was right after he killed the Bhaumasura. And he saw Lord Indra, and he returned to Lord Indra the earrings that were stolen from Aditi, his Lord Indra's mother, from Bhaumasura. This made Lord Indra very, very upset. So Lord Indra is very happy that Lord Krishna, after killing Bhaumasura, had returned returned the earrings. And then as they were leaving, they had excavated up a tree to take back with them to Dwarka. And the residents of Indraloka, they became very, very upset. And Lord Indra became very upset. That you're stealing this, you're taking this, how could you do this? And Srila Prabhupada comments on this, how, quickly, we often forget, Krishna is actually maintaining and taking care of us. And then Krishna then may take something from us. And then we become very, very discouraged or very upset at Krishna. So it's a little bit of the pastime there. I'll stop here and see if there's any discussion with regards to the topic of today. Any questions or comments we can also take. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Vishnu Gada Prabhu.
HG Dronacarya Prabhu. So in the verse, it talks about how without individuality. Could you explain a little bit about that? It says that the wives had no individuality. Could you clarify that or speak about that?
That's a good point. So they were, I'm actually not sure exactly what it meant there. So we know they were taken by Bhaumasura. And then Krishna had accepted them. What do you think? What's your thoughts on that? I'm not sure exactly what.
Let's see what the other devotees think. I can chime in afterwards if they.
Yeah.
Maybe Kaivalya Prabhu or others have some. Nobody? No? I took it that the as you mentioned, the principal wives of Krishna, they had their own each one had their own wedding ceremony, etc. But I took it that these 16,100, they were all married together. They didn't have their individual situations. I mean, not that Krishna wasn't with them at all, but that's how I took it. But it's not explained. Because of course they're all individual souls. They're not, or they're all individual persons. But lack of individuality in terms of they were betrothed and accepted by Lord Krishna together, all together. Does that make sense?
As a group, yeah. Yeah, that does make sense.
In the Lord Krishna's daily activities, if you read there, Lord Krishna's taking rest in all of his palaces with his queens, and then the rooster crows, and the queens get a little bit irritated, but Krishna gets up to perform his activities. And there it says that the Parijata tree is there in every palace, in the courtyard of every palace. What do you make of that?
I guess, I'm not sure exactly what to make of that. Is it explained there? And what I imagine the Parijata tree could, be, they give off seeds, and then those seeds could also fructify and be present. Or Krishna could just desire it to happen, and it could happen. Or the other wives also wanted one when they saw the Parijata tree in front of Satyabhama's palace.
I didn't find any commentary about it, but it's an interesting point. And as you mentioned, it could be that Krishna brought them for the other queens too after they saw that Satyabhama got a tree. Or it's not mentioned, so I just thought that was interesting. Another point in the 9th canto, if you search for Parijata in the Vedabase, you'll find a commentary where Srila Prabhupada says that the Parijata is actually the same as the desire tree, Panchakalpatarubhyascha, coming from the spiritual world. It's like a tree avatar, like Tulsi Devi, the Parijata tree. So that's kind of interesting.
That's nice.
So I could ask you another tough question. You want a tough question?
Tough question? Sure.
So one of the important points of this verse is about how, we don't see or regard a devotee according to their class or birth or any of that stuff. Lord Chaitanya says, Je bhaje she boro, abhakta heen char, Krishna bhajana nahi jati kuladi bichar. Anybody who worships Krishna, they're great. And someone who's non-devotee, they're lower. But he says, Krishna, someone who's worshiping Krishna, jati, we don't consider their birth or their family, kuladi bichar. So then, now in ISKCON, there's controversy over if women can be gurus. And in fact, recently there were some challenges about this. So apparently in India, the GBC has accepted that women can be gurus, but because of some objections by the India Bureau, they agreed that it can be adjusted in India. So what is that about? That's a tough question, I know, I'm sorry. But that's kind of like part of the elephant in the room a little bit when we talk about this. Don't consider birth.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know, yeah, you'd have to speak to the devotees that, I guess, from the Indian Bureau that have, I guess there's strong feelings about this. They, I haven't studied it too much, but I've listened to several debates about this regarding some of the devotees inside, from either side. And it is somewhat controversial, but I don't understand, personally, the process of bhakti is about relationship, and that, it clearly states here that there is no bodily disqualification of a devotee. So some interpret that meaning that it's, to go back to the spiritual world, to go back to Godhead, there's no bodily disqualification, but to perform certain functions, there would be a bodily disqualification. And one of those would be to become an initiating guru. That's kind of the argument, but I don't, I mean, I can only speak from my understanding. I don't see necessarily why that would be the case. But in India, perhaps where things are more conservative with regards to men and women, I think they feel that that is more of the case. I think more, for us, a lot of times I think some of the challenges that we experience more so here in America is we make different divisions based on like an Indian devotee versus an American devotee. Like we'll say there, you see the Indian devotee, or we'll say that's a black body devotee, or a white body devotee, or an Indian body devotee, or female. And sometimes with that, we do it as simply just as an identification, which is okay. Like there's the devotee with the red kurta on. That's just to be able to identify somebody. But if we actually think that that person is, higher or lower, qualified or unqualified because of the body that they have, that's very dangerous and is spoken about, spoken against here. But with regards, I guess it's a kind of a bigger discussion. I'm not addressing it directly on, but I don't know. Krishna basically says everybody can attain the supreme destination. There's no disqualification. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I see Prananath Prabhu has his hand raised.
Oh, there it is. Oh, I thought Prananath Prabhu would be in New Vrindavan.
No, I'm going this evening, Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm about to catch up. Thank you for the nice class, Prabhu. Just wanted to, going back to Vishnu Gada Prabhu's question. So Prabhupada didn't give the order of sannyasi to any women, right? Vishnu Gada Prabhu, is this
No,
correct?
it's not, there's not generally not Vedic, no.
Right. So don't we follow the same? I mean, I'm just trying to understand. And it's not also in the Vedic culture, it's not there, right? And Prabhupada never gave. So how do we understand if we are following in the disciplic succession and in the authorities?
Well, that's a Varnashram institution. The Varnashram institution is it's a material arrangement. When Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda Roy, please tell me what's the goal of life and how to attain it. the first thing Ramananda Roy responded, if you remember. You remember what he said, Ramananda Roy? He said, follow the Varnashram institution. Yeah, do the follow Varnashram for social orders, for spiritual orders. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, that's external. That's external. But we'd say for order in society, certain things are there. But beyond the order of society, there's the transcendental position, which is a devotee, a Vaishnava, who's not considered to be of any caste. Thinking a person is a certain a Vaishnava is from a particular caste is considered hellish mentality. So as Dronacharya Prabhu just said, if somebody's got a red kurta, oh, that's the person with the red kurta, but we're not thinking they are that person, that are that red kurta. Similarly, that makes sense. So I don't know if you want to extrapolate from your question that since Prabhupada never made women sannyasis, therefore women shouldn't be initiating gurus. I don't know if that's where you're going or not. I don't know.
No, I'm just trying to understand what was Prabhupada's stand on this or position on this.
Yeah, he generally said no. Although he said that Mother Jamuna was as good as a sannyasi in some letters, you'll see. Although he didn't give her any formal sannyas initiation or anything. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhu.
Did any women explicitly express their desire to be gurus when Prabhupada was on the planet?
And not that I'm aware of. Neither did men, because Srila Prabhupada was the guru, the exclusive guru in ISKCON.
But so when he said everybody should become a guru and they should, propagate this, at that time also he didn't, was there a clue as to men and women, or did he say it should be men only?
In the few times that the question was directly asked like that, there was a few interviews and questions directly. Prabhupada said, yes, why not? If a reporter and a man, and once time I think in Canada, said, yes, why not?
So
and in 1969, when he was developing the Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Vedanta, he said, and hopefully within 5 years, all my disciples will be initiating gurus, he said. So I guess you could take it one or two ways. All when you said all my disciples, I mean that includes women, you would think, isn't it?
yes.
So
I would say that
Hare Krishna, I wanted to say that regarding jivas and female bodies as gurus, it has happened within ISKCON. I guess, I don't know if it would be considered illegally or not, but as a bhaktin in Washington, D.C., we had some guests that would come. And I remember this one Vaishnavi woman in saffron. And I didn't understand it at the time, but, we're connected now, but she was given sannyas at New Vrindavan under Kirtananda's rule. And I somehow, I guess, associated with Deva Amrita Swami as well. Her name was Supreme Absolute Truth. That was the name she was given. So it has happened, I guess, before the GBC rule or ruling, but that was about 30 years ago.
that's while New Vrindavan was outside of ISKCON.
Ah, okay, yeah.
the I think it's also important to mention when we talk about the guru that Srila Prabhupada is for ISKCON is the prominent as founder Acharya. He's the prominent Shiksha Guru for everyone, and anyone who can lead us, anybody can lead us to Srila Prabhupada and give us his mercy, to connect to Srila Prabhupada, male, female, young, old, rich, no discrimination. I don't see why then, a woman, if they say Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru, are equal manifestations of the Guru Tattva, then, a qualified person who's fully connected to Srila Prabhupada, why they wouldn't allow us to, why they wouldn't be able to make that connection logically. Why that wouldn't be there.
Just as a point of information, Vedic Brahmins, when Srila Prabhupada started the, Krishna consciousness movement, they were objected to Westerners getting second initiation, or what we call Brahminical initiation. And also, he said they objected to that the Westerners would Prabhupada agree that they'd eventually be giving initiation. And the Vedic Brahmins said, well, okay, I mean, they might be able to give shiksha, but no diksha. No diksha. That has to be, people born in India who are born in Brahmin families. So Prabhupada rejected that argument. Oh, not just shiksha, but also diksha. If the Hare Krishna movement is going to spread all over the world, it's then there has to be Diksha gurus in all parts of the world. So a similar argument, sometimes people argue, oh, the women can be shiksha but not diksha. Similar kind of argument.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't see the logic in it, but me personally. But others obviously do. I remember I was in Vrindavan. Mr. Vinny, you may remember this. It was Guru Purnima in 2002 or 3, and they were doing Abhishek for the Gaur-Nitai deities in the temple room, but only the men could participate in it, and the women, they had their own Abhishek of a different Gaur-Nitai. Not the ones that were installed on the altar, but different, maybe somebody's home deities somewhere else. And I thought that was really strange, because in Philadelphia, men and women, women were Brahmins, men were Brahmins, Mother Sudamani and, Mother Sangeeta and somebody other, Mother Vikukshi, they would all bathe, Gaur-Nitai right there. But in India, that obviously wasn't. In Vrindavan, that wasn't going on. That was all done separately. So, as we can see, it is we're fortunate not to have those barriers necessarily here where we are geographically in the world. Kopesh, you have your hand up. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So thank you very much for this class. I have a, because we were discussing about something about gurus. I was just curious, what are the qualifications for the gurus? I have came across in the past Bhagavad Gita 4.34, text where it says, spiritual master without following the principle of disciplic successions. So, I mean, what is the ISKCON way of, who can be the guru? like a more defined way.
In the Nectar of Instruction, the first verse, he states that a sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, the belly, and the genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. So that is one qualification, reference to one of the areas of qualification. So first qualification, so another qualification of guru, and principal qualification of guru, is that they repeat exactly what their spiritual master has done and has said, and they don't change anything for their own personal, based on their own personal speculation or for their own gratification. So that's another qualification. They demonstrate through their exemplary acts in the preaching and the dissemination of Krishna consciousness for the upliftment of people, inspiring them in that way. There is the Shiksha Guru, who is one who gives instructions to a disciple, to devotees. Shiksha meaning teachings or instructions. And that can be many, that can be anybody. The Diksha Guru, not anybody, but that can be anyone any qualified person. You can have multiple Shiksha Gurus. The Diksha Guru is one who actually gives the formal process of initiation, connecting one to the Guru Parampara. So with that, specifically within ISKCON, there is, in order to make sure that nobody becomes misled, falls victim to, somebody who's really not qualified. They have basically a list of people who are, eligible to give this initiation. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. May I know the reference? You mentioned Nectar of Devotion, right? That's where it is coming from.
It was a Nectar of Instruction.
Nectar of Instruction.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the relationship between the guru and the disciple. So the disciple, he renders service, submissive inquiry, as you quoted from the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
And the guru guides the disciple, leading him back to Godhead. Basically, he removes the barriers and the obstacles along the way and shows them the path. Removing their, we talk about the purification process of bhakti. So that verse I mentioned from the second canto, 4th chapter, 18th verse. It says that if one is addicted to sinful acts, can be purified by taking shelter of the devotees of the Lord. Due to his being the supreme power. So the spiritual master, he in the Guru Astakam is explained as there's a forest fire that's going on in this material world and even in our lives, where we're burning with these material desires. And it becomes extinguished by the mercy of the self-realized soul, spiritual master. Basically creates like a rain cloud that extinguishes this blazing fire. And what is he giving? He's giving Krishna's mercy. How do we free ourselves from our material condition of life? And who are we really? And how do we re-engage in our eternal activity of devotional service?
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier in regards to guruship and bodies, you referenced the word discrimination. We know that bhakti is not based on anything discriminatory. However, everyone has conditionings. Would you give a perspective? Well, never mind, not a perspective, but would you share what the solution would be to discriminatory acts regarding bhakti, and what offense it is and how it relates to not the best in terms of what should be done in bhakti?
It's a big question, and just look at the time, it's a little bit late. We're at 9:08, but I'll just say real quickly, this, with regards to sadachar, or one's behavior, that is a reflection of one's development in bhakti. So there's some levels of engagement, and one can call that discrimination, of based on one's qualification of practicing the process of Krishna consciousness. One may be given particular engagements suitable for them. But that oftentimes is based on the sadachar, one's behavior that they've shown, one's dedication that they've shown, or ability to accept a particular type of service. But the free distribution of Krishna consciousness, that should not be discriminated at all. For instance, to go on the altar to worship the deity, one has to receive certain training, but that training isn't simply enough. One actually has to be of the living the etiquette and the behavior of one of Brahminical nature. And if one's not, there's other services that can be done. And those services really are not considered lower services in any way, because they're all absolute, because they're all in connection with Krishna. It's just a level of special mercy that one has the ability to then worship the Lord in a more intimate way. But in terms of, again, it's freely distributing Krishna consciousness and making sure everybody has access to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, the chanting of the holy names. This should go on absolutely without discrimination. And as one proves themselves, he or she, to be the ability to advance in Krishna consciousness, more and more facility is provided by Krishna to come closer to Krishna.
So when I mentioned discriminatory, it references more one's more ability to be connected to false ego, thinking that one is this one's better than or less than. Mm-hmm. And I guess that does regard services, but one would have to be, on a higher level themselves to determine whether or not somebody's eligible for different levels of service. And, we're all in the shower together. So that's what I'm more referencing. So that would be more of a, I guess, a Vishnugata question that I'll ask later. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Well, I'll say on that platform that, you know, we're given the three categories of devotees, the Kanishta, the Madhyam, and the Uttama. And interestingly enough, the person on the Uttama Adhikari, the highest level, actually thinks them, the quality of that is they actually think themselves to be the most unqualified.
Correct. I've read that also.
Yeah. So we have to see things through the lens of the absolute realm, not necessarily our conditioned realm. And to the point where we feel ourselves to be qualified is actually a level of disqualification.
Perfect example of what I'm speaking of.
Yeah. So at the same time, there's levels of engagement, you know, that one has to give, whether it's through the spiritual master, various authorities, mentors. They have to be able to use their intelligence that Krishna has given them, guided from within through their connection and devotional service, to be able to make certain decisions that will engage devotees in appropriate ways. This is all very natural. I think can be understood, you know, clearly that way. So, thank you for the question. All right, tonight we just want to remind everybody that we have Srila Prabhupada Leela night. We hope to see you all at 7 o'clock. Those that want to learn shlokas, you can join us at 6:40. Hare Krishna. Have a wonderful Krishna conscious day. I apologize for going over. I didn't had some nice discussion here, and see you all either tonight or tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.